shaking his head. "Still no air?" he muttered often enough that it stuck to the walls. I learned young how to fold myself small, how to escape into library stacks where no one measured my worth against his disappointment. I filled notebooks with borrowed voices, women who had crossed oceans, teachers who had stitched wounds. In their pages, I found pieces of myself my father refused to see. When I was 13, my mother's breath gave out. Cancer hollowed her chest until oxygen tanks hummed through the house. On the day of her funeral, the sky hung low and gray. My father never shed a tear. He only cleared his throat at the pulpit and said, "She leaves behind a void, but the Clarkson family must move forward." His words cut deeper than his silence. 3 months later, he remarried. Veronica swept into our home with polished nails and eyes that weighed everything in the room. She replaced curtains, rearranged photographs, and smiled as if she had always belonged. By the time I understood what she meant for me, it was already too late. Once Veronica settled in, the house transformed. Family portraits multiplied on the walls, and every one of them revolved around her polished smile or the boy she gave my father. The picture of my mother was pushed into a hallway shadow. My own face, when it appeared at all, tilted from a side shelf, half forgotten. When Ethan was born, the house filled with blue balloons and cards scrawled with finely, "A son." Neighbors crowded in with casseroles and praise, and my father cradled him as though the universe had finally corrected itself. I was 16 then, tall enough to stand in the doorway and watch the celebration without being seen. From that moment, I became a shadow in my own home. Holidays, gifts, even casual conversations, every word bent toward the golden boy. To keep from disappearing entirely, I ran. Around the track at dawn, through rope climbs until my palms blistered. Under weights that shook my arms, I found strength in silence, drive in the pounding of my own heartbeat. Each mile whispered the same promise: I would not stay invisible. One evening at dinner, I set down my fork and said it out loud. I was going to join the Navy SEALs. The table went still. My father's mouth twisted, then broke into a chuckle that spread into a dismissive laugh. "That's not for girls," he said, waving me away like smoke. His words landed like a dare. In that moment, I decided I would become exactly what he could never imagine, proof that his judgment had never defined me. Kandahar was black that night, the kind of darkness that presses against your skin. The desert air cut like glass, and the only light came from the sudden burst of fire when the convoy ahead of us struck a buried charge. Steel twisted, flames shot skyward, and the night turned into a storm of gunfire. The ground shook beneath my boots as the team sprinted forward, bullets tearing the air like angry insects, helicopters circling above in desperate arcs of light. I threw myself against the overturned armor, the heat so fierce it blistered the air. Smoke clawed into my throat, thick enough to choke on. Inside, through the orange haze, a soldier thrashed, pinned, eyes wide and wild. His voice broke through the roar. I can't breathe!" I forced my shoulders past a bent frame, metal gouging my skin, and gripped under his arms. My muscles screamed as I wrenched him free from the furnace. My shoulder tore against jagged steel, but I held him tight, whispering close to his ear, "Breathe, soldier. You're not done yet." His weight collapsed into me, heavy but alive. By dawn, 17 men had been dragged from fire and smoke. Later, in the fluorescent quiet of base, I read the casualty report, my hand trembling over one name: Ethan Clarkson, my father's golden heir, the brother celebrated in every photograph. I folded the report and slid it deep into my pack. No one would ever know it was me. The truth was heavier than any weapon I'd carried. Years later, Austin felt louder than any battlefield. Ethan returned a hero, polished and groomed for politics, while my father and Veronica staged celebration after celebration. I attended a few, sitting at the far end of the table, chewing through silence while champagne glasses clinked in Ethan's honor. Clarkson men are the future of Texas. My father boasted to anyone who'd listen. My son will carry our name into history. As for Minerva, he let the pause cut sharp. She chose a stray path. Laughter followed him like loyal dogs. I tightened my fist beneath the tablecloth, but I said nothing. Back home, the rescue report from Kandahar still lay folded in my desk drawer, the paper yellowing, the truth locked away where no one would see it. One night in a dim bar, a former teammate, drunk and loose with words, leaned across the counter. If people knew you pulled that kid out of fire, this whole damn state would bow to you. His voice slurred, heavy with awe. I sipped my drink and answered softly. That's not what I need. But deep inside, the memory burned like shrapnel. The silence I had chosen was a blade I carried every day. And I knew, sooner or later, a fork would fall again, loud enough to make every head turn. The ballroom in downtown Austin glittered beneath chandeliers that burned like suns. Every table dressed in white linen, every chair filled with donors, politicians, and power brokers hungry for spectacle. Ethan stood on stage, his smile polished, his shoulders squared like a man already rehearsing for office. Applause chased him wherever he moved. I entered quietly, a shadow in a plain black dress. A few eyes flicked toward me, lingered, then turned away as if I were a misplaced guest at the wrong celebration. My father took the stage, lifting his glass with the confidence of a man who believed the room belonged to him. The Clarkson legacy, he announced, voice booming, is here, in my son. All else, he paused, eyes locking on me, has been nothing but a burden. A ripple of laughter spread, thin and uncomfortable. He leaned into it, smiling wider. What story could a poor veteran tell in a room like this? The chuckles that followed scraped against my skin, but I sat still, counting my breath the way my mother once taught me. The air tightened, every inhale a discipline, every exhale a refusal to break. Then the doors opened. A man in full dress uniform entered, silver hair sharp against the blue of his jacket. The rows of ribbons across his chest caught the light as he strode forward. Conversations died mid-sentence. He didn't pause, didn't look left or right. He came straight to me, heels striking the floor like a drumbeat. He stopped, saluted, and said clearly enough for every chandelier to tremble, "This woman saved 17 lives in Kandahar, including the very son you celebrate tonight." A fork slipped, metal striking china, then silence. The sound carried like a bell. The entire room froze. The chandeliers no longer sparkled with triumph. They glared down on a room stunned into stillness. My father's face had gone rigid, his knuckles white around the stem of his glass. Veronica forced a brittle laugh, her voice pitched too high. "Let's not make a scene. This is a night for celebration." Her words fluttered weakly, unable to catch. Across the stage, Ethan's composure fractured, his jaw clenched, his hands trembled at his sides. He looked from the general to me, then back again, searching for a place to stand. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then, slowly, he rose. His movements were deliberate, every eye tracking him. He turned toward me, squared his shoulders, and lifted his hand in a salute. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but clear. A gasp tore through the tables. Veterans in the crowd pushed their chairs back and stood, some saluting, others clapping, the sound growing until it rolled like thunder through the hall. I remained seated, meeting Ethan's eyes only for a moment before nodding once. My silence carried louder than applause. At the head table, Charles Clarkson sat motionless, his authority collapsing in real time. His hands shook, his eyes darkened. For the first time in his long, carefully built life, he wasn't the man everyone looked to. He was just a father, unmasked, caught in a truth he could neither deny nor command. The hallway behind the ballroom was dim, the gold sconces casting a tired glow against the walls. From beyond the doors came the muted thrum of jazz, the laughter of guests trying to smooth over the tremor that had cracked the evening wide open. I leaned against the cool plaster, needing air that wasn't perfumed with money and pride. Charles found me there. His steps were heavy, his glass long abandoned, his voice low and rough with bourbon. "You could have told me in private," he muttered, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. "We could fix this. I can fix it." I met his gaze without blinking. "You can't fix it with money. You can't fix what you already let die. You missed your chance when she was still alive." His hand trembled as he adjusted his cuff, the old gesture of control slipping into desperation. "I only wanted a son to carry the name forward," he whispered, the words fraying at the edges. Footsteps cut through his excuse. Ethan appeared, his jacket gone, his tie loosened, the gleam of a candidate stripped away. He looked straight at our father, his shoulders unsteady, but his voice unshaken. "If it weren't for her, I'd be dead in Afghanistan. Dad, you can't bury this. Not anymore." Veronica glided in, her tone sweet but sharp. "This isn't the place to drag up old wounds." Ethan turned, his eyes blazing. "No. This is the only place, the only time." For the first time in our lives, we stood together in the same frame, father, daughter, son, and the woman who had played queen too long. No chandeliers, no applause, just the raw truth, and no way left to escape it. The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that only exists on the edge of town. Outside, the porch light glowed against the dark, the smell of roasted coffee lingering from the kitchen. I had settled into the rhythm of silence again, certain my family would retreat into their usual patterns of denial. Then came a knock at the door. 3 soft raps. Hesitant, unfamiliar. When I opened it, my father stood there, shoulders heavier than I had ever seen them. No entourage, no polished grin. In his hands, not a checkbook or a contract, but a small wooden box. He stepped inside, sat at my kitchen table, and slid the box toward me. His voice was low, stripped bare. "I spent my life chasing an heir," he said. "And all along, my daughter was here. I chose not to see it." My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a worn journal, the cover softened by time. I flipped it open, and my mother's handwriting met me in blue ink. "Keep your head up. Your breath is yours." The words I had carried through every humiliation, every mile, every battlefield, they were here, waiting. He watched me trace the letters, his eyes rimmed red. "I should never have boxed her away," he admitted. I should never have boxed you away." The weight of it pressed between us, thicker than the silence we'd lived in for decades. Before I could answer, footsteps approached. Ethan entered, no longer the candidate in tailored suits, but a young man in rolled-up sleeves, hair slightly mussed, like he'd finally let himself exhale. He pulled out a chair and sat with us, his voice unsteady but honest. "All this time," he said, "I've been playing a part in Dad's script, smiling when told to, saying the right lines. But the night of the gala, when the truth came out, I realized I don't even know your story. Minerva, I want to hear it. I want to know you." The words struck deeper than the applause in that ballroom. He wasn't offering pity, he was asking for connection. My father lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. For the first time in my life, he didn't try to stand taller than me. He simply sat there, broken but human, the weight of his choices finally dragging him down to earth. Ethan reached across the table, palm open, bridging a distance that had stretched years too long. Veronica's name was nowhere in this moment. The crown she had worn so confidently had slipped beyond reach. In her place was something stronger, a brother seeking truth, a father bowing to it, and a daughter who had carried it all along. The journal lay open on the table between us, my mother's voice etched across its pages, and for the first time in years, the air in that room felt like mine to breathe. The morning was still, the kind of stillness that comes only after nights heavy with reckoning. I sat on the porch with my coffee, the steam curling upward into the early Texas air. The wooden boards creaked under my weight, familiar and grounding. Inside the kitchen, the window had been left open a crack, and a faint gust slipped through. On the counter, a fork quivered against a plate, its soft tremble catching my ear. It was a sound so small, yet it carried the weight of everything that had broken open at the gala. My phone buzzed beside me. I turned it over, light flashing across the screen. A single message from Ethan. "We'll see each other soon. This time, not for Dad, but for you." I let the words sink in, then placed the phone face down, the wood warm beneath my palm. A smile tugged at the corners of my mouth, unforced and quiet. I took a deep breath, letting it stretch through my chest, slow and steady. For the first time in years, breathing felt like choice, not survival. The memory rose sharp and clean. The echo of metal on china, the stunned silence that followed. A fork falling in a ballroom of chandeliers had turned the tide of an entire night. It wasn't the general's medals or my father's glass raised in arrogance that remained. It was that sound, a truth no one could dismiss, forcing every head to turn, every heart to pause. Now, here at my table, the fork's faint shiver in the breeze carried the same message. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to arrive at the right moment, undeniable, demanding its place. I leaned back, coffee cooling in my hands, and let the silence fold around me. The world could keep its trophies, its staged applause, its desperate hunger for legacies. My worth had never been there. It had been in every mile I ran unseen, every breath I counted when the air grew